Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Great to see such a packed room here in Chicago at the Politico CNN Grill. And hi to all our viewers watching this remotely too. My name is Suzanne Lynch. I'm author of Politico's Global Playbook. That's our kind of flagship international newsletter that serves our growing global audience and connects some of the centers where Politico works out of: Washington, Brussels, and further afield. And we cover some of the world's big global moments, including the Democratic Convention, because I can tell you a lot of people around the world are watching the United States, watching this city, and waiting to see what happens in November. I'm delighted to be hosting this panel with three of America's best-known mayors: Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, Atlanta Mayor Andre Dickens, and New York Mayor Eric Adams. So, Mayor Johnson, we are in your hometown of Chicago, so I'm going to start with you. Just yesterday, the Republican vice presidential candidate, J.D. Vance, had this to say about Chicago and the fact that the convention is taking place here. He said, "It's almost a joke to me that they held it in Chicago, which has become the murder capital of the United States of America, thanks to a very failed democratic leadership." And he described it as a third world country. What's your response?
Well, first of all, thank you all for being in the greatest freaking city in the world, the city of Chicago. And we've been having a lot of conversations, so my voice is returning slowly. But let me just say this. The Republican Party as a whole, they are becoming increasingly more and more useless. The Republican Party is about as needed or as useful as a hotel key card after checkout. They don't serve purpose anymore. And the fact of the matter is, since I've been in office, $20 billion of new investment, of which $7 billion of new investment right here on the west side of the city of Chicago. We've passed a $1.25 billion investment for neighborhood and economic development. It's the most substantial investment for the west and south sides in the history of Chicago. And by the way, for the record, homicides in the city of Chicago are down double digits since I've been in office. Listen, homicides are down across America. The work that Mayor Adams and Mayor Dickens and other mayors are doing across America, we're actually showing up for the American people, unlike the Republican Party, who was dedicated to chaos. Again, this is the party that made an excuse when a bunch of extremists attacked our country and wanted to overthrow an election. We will not be lectured by someone who doesn't even believe in democracy.
But in saying that, and I hear that is really interesting to hear those statistics you mentioned there. But at the end of the day, a lot of voters are concerned about, certain trends in cities that we did see after the pandemic. Now, as you say there, some of that has improved. But, how big of an issue, the Republicans are able to tap into some concern that voters have. Andre Dickens, do you think your party is able to counter those concerns about things like crime in urban spaces? Are you equipped enough to counter that narrative?
Well, yeah, as Mayor Johnson said, across America, homicides are down, and they've been down under the Biden-Harris administration. The things that we put in place with American Rescue Plan Act dollars, the things that came in place that help people get jobs, this jobs growth has helped to reduce violent crime. Atlanta had the fourth highest drop in violent crime across the nation of any other city last year, and that was due to us working well, just like all these other mayors, on our youth programs, on our jobs programs, and making sure people were employed and active. And so these were policies that Biden and Harris, they put together, and I think that when Harris becomes president, we'll continue to see a proliferation of those great policies working directly with mayors. The other thing I'd say, too, about this is we know very well that when you have, federal policies and they don't reach down to cities, you're going to have a problem deploying them. Right. You're going to have a problem implementing them. You're going to have a problem with people being able to see it. Well, that's why the bipartisan infrastructure law, the American Rescue Plan Act, they came to cities. And so for us to be able to have this money that we can deploy, because we know what's going on in our cities. We live it, we breathe it every day. People get to see us and tell us the problems. So when we have this great relationship with, like, the HUD secretary who's here in the audience today, we can call directly to the White House. And that has made a significant difference in everything from housing to transportation projects, to everything, the Department of Labor, working on our labor improvements and making sure people have jobs, increasing our minimum wage in Atlanta to $17.50 an hour. So these things came under Biden, Harris, and mayors like us that are Democrats that are leading complicated cities and not just talking about it, but doing the work.
And actually, Mayor Dickens, that's a crucial theme you're hitting on there, that relationship between the federal and the city level when it comes to all these challenges facing the city. You described a very kind of positive relationship there. I mean, Mayor Adams, your own relationship with the Biden administration, with the federal government, it hasn't always been, you haven't always been singing from the same hymn sheet. I'm thinking of the migration issue that reared its head, particularly a couple of years ago. Did the Biden administration do enough there? What's your response?
Well, I think, first of all, families could disagree, and that's quite all right. But when you look at the overall analysis of what the Biden and Harris team were able to produce for our country around public safety, around affordability, around those issues that are bread and butter issues. And in the Democratic Party, that's what really unique. We are not insensitive and insecure about our relationships. That if we disagree, we disagree.
That's right.
But we're going to move the country forward, and we did that. Cycling out of COVID, many people forgot that 5-letter word that devastated our country. They got us through that. They got us through with a stronger economy. They got us through it when I needed the president to come to New York City to look at the overproliferation of guns on our streets. As the Democrats have fought to get rid of assault rifles and really support public safety, we are the party of public safety. And so in those areas where we disagree, we're going to be candid, we're going to be honest about it. But I call for executive orders. That's what this administration did, and due to those executive orders, we saw going from 4,000 migrants and asylum seekers a week coming to our city down to less than 700. And so there were real bipartisan solutions that the Republican Party stopped. We need to be clear on that long-standing needs of having real immigration reform is what we need to look at, because we need to put people on the pathway of the American dream.
Mayor Johnson, just on this issue of migration, and it's often linked sometimes to homelessness, which is a situation, a discussion we can have a bit later. But I notice here, and other people have said it, we see, you see people on the streets of Chicago. I saw signs, people, begging, saying they're from Venezuela, from different parts of the world who've come to Chicago. What is the situation at the moment in terms of your ability to house these migrants that are coming? There does seem to be, not as much of this busing up to the cities from the south that we saw, and we had been maybe expecting it this week. But bring us up to speed on where things are on that.
Well, let's go back to what Mayor Adams said, that we had the failure of Trump Republicans who blocked a bipartisan agreement between the Senate and President Biden to actually do something about the border. We have not had substantive immigration reform policy since I was in high school. And the one we did before that, the Bears were Super Bowl champions. So much has changed over the course of decades in this country, but the one thing that has not changed has been the ill will, mean-spirited ideology of the Republican Party. Now, the fact that we have a sitting governor in Texas using his power to attack our cities. You all see what's in common up here.
Yeah.
He is sending buses to our cities and attacking what is good and decent about our country. Whether you are a descendant of slaves, or whether you are immigrants, this is a country that has been founded on those very principles and values. Look, the city of Chicago is a beautiful testament to it. A black Haitian immigrant fell in love with a Potawatomi woman, set up and established a trade post at the banks of the Chicago River because they understood that this would be a global place for trade to occur. And that's the love story of Chicago. That's the love story of America versus the hate that's coming from the Republican Party. Now, the bottom line is this. Vice President Kamala Harris has demonstrated her commitment to investing in our people, making sure that we have real substantive policies to transform our immigration policies in this country, but investing in people. She's called for $100 billion to create a pathway to home ownership in this country right now. She has called for a policy that would provide rental support for families who make less than $100,000 a year, $300 billion in our public education system, That's the type of transformation that we need. That's what we're doing in Chicago, New York. That's what we're doing in Atlanta. But that's the work that we continue to do together. And so this issue around new arrivals, let me just say this last thing. The fact that we have such a derelict of responsibility from the Republican Party is an abdication of duty, but it's also an affront to our democracy. The fact that they are not willing to work with us speaks more about who they are versus who we are, when we are literally establishing resettlement operations ran by local municipalities, which is the first time in the history of America where local municipalities like Mayor Adams, Mayor Dickens, and myself have had to stand up and do.
Well, you've just touched on one of the big issues, which is housing. It was interesting last night that President Obama in his speech addressed the issue. We heard Senator Bernie Sanders on the stage here at the Politico CNN Grill during the week. He was criticizing Congress for not doing more on the housing crisis. You know, has it been kind of a blind spot for Democrats? We don't usually hear this, but really a lot of Americans, you were talking there about housing new arrivals, but there's also, you know, middle-income Americans, younger Americans who feel that they cannot get on the housing ladder, that feel that the American dream has let them down. Mayor Dickens, I mean, what's your experience in Atlanta on this? How big of an issue is this for you guys electorally, if nothing else?
Well, this is one of the biggest challenges right now going on. We are in a housing crisis across the United States. It's a crisis to make sure that housing is affordable and attainable. Every mayor is seeing it all throughout the nation. You're finding that people have more than money. To be able to pay their rent, to pay their mortgage, is becoming more of a challenge to compete with groceries, competing with medicine, competing with childcare, competing with utility prices. And so folks are having a hard time, and that's been happening since about, I'll probably say, put it at about 2010, 2012, and it's just been going steady up from there. So we've been building a lot of affordable mixed income housing very rapidly. I've built about 10,000 units in the past 2.5 years since being mayor, and our goal is to continue on that pace so that we can provide housing for people that live, work, and to be able to play and live in the same city that they work in. And that means for firefighters, police officers, teachers, nurses, everybody. These individuals provide valuable service to our city. They are individuals that, you know, need a place to stay versus them having to take an hour-and-a-half, 2-hour drive or bus into the city. They can live into the city. And so what I'm loving what I'm hearing from the Harris campaign is $25,000 for down payment assistance. That's going to be huge. Right. And then tax credits of $10,000 for these new first-time home buyers. And to incentivize developers to build more starter homes. You've seen a lot of development been for luxury, and these big houses or huge, expensive million-dollar condos. But to get developers in the habit of building houses up the whole ladder, from low income to moderate income to, you know, whatever. And that is a key formula for us to have more housing stock, more supply to meet this demand. Look, it's no secret, people want to be in our cities. America is becoming more urbanized. About 80+% of Americans live in cities, and they live in cities that you know, now we have 30% of them are led by black mayors. And so you got all this coming in. Folks are moving to our cities, and we have to solve the problem, whether it's people coming from the border or it's people leaving suburban America coming into the cities where all the amenities are. This is our challenge, and we're meeting it head on. And what I've seen in the Biden-Harris administration now has been helpful. But what I've heard also in Harris, what she put out, I think last week, about, you know, the first-time home buyers and how we're going to do more housing development, that is substantial. Last thing I'll say is mixed income means that the school teacher, the bus driver, and the principal can all live in this same community, and their kids can get these benefits of these amenities. We don't want just, you know, 100%, you know, a poor door or public housing that doesn't have meaningful connection to community. We want it all to be mixed, and that's where people can go up the ladder. So if you're in subsidized housing now, 5 or 10 years later with a jobs program, you can graduate out of that and get this first-time home buyer down payment assistance and be a home owner. That's what we are doing, and that's what we want to do more of once she's elected.
Mayor Adams, I mean, did Bernie Sanders' point here during the week was an interesting one, that he said that Congress has been negligent in not recognizing the housing crisis. I mean, is there more Congress can do, or the federal? I mean, what would help alleviate things? You know,
well,
help the situation.
I think there's a combination of things, and you know, I'm excited also seeing the Secretary of HUD When I look back at the Officer Teachers Next Door program, came out of HUD. It was a program that allowed police officers and teachers, and then expanded to other groups, to go into communities that had economic challenges. They were able to go there, they were able to purchase the homes on a severe discount and stabilize these communities. Because I think, my brother is right, that we can't merely say extreme low income. We are hemorrhaging in our cities middle income working people, our teachers and our accountants. And so finding these creative programs to match what we're doing on the state and the city level, like we had historically the Mitchell-Lama programs, they became the stabilizing forces in many of our communities. Those are the types of creative actions that I believe we can take on the federal level to do matching dollars on the state level and the city level to move forward a real housing agenda. In New York City, we have a 1.4% vacancy rate. That's just not sustainable. To not be able to build more, we have a major initiative of a City of Yes, where we want to change our zoning policies, which in America have been extremely racist. We have used zoning to prevent housing in particular parts of this country. And we need to dismantle that, and we have to be honest about it. We have to be honest about a conversation. If you have access to good school, a good hospital, good food sources, good transportation, you need to be taking more housing in those communities. A little bit more housing could improve the housing structure. We got to build more. That's the only way we're going to get out of this problem, is to build more and use creative ways to do so, like some of the stuff that you're doing with the modular and trailer type housing. We have to think differently about housing the next generation.
Just on that, I mean, Mayor Johnson, that's one of the things we're talking about here is what the federal, what can be done at federal level. I mean, President Obama even referenced the fact that the kind of whole system needs to be overhauled last night. He didn't really go into specifics, but is there anything that's holding you back in Chicago, or what needs to change in terms of trying to address this major problem around housing?
Well, we have a taxing structure in this country that favors the ultra-rich. I mean, it's not so much holding me back personally, but it's holding the families back who are just trying to make the ends meet. If you talk to any one of us, our personal journey, look, I know what it's like to have an orange extension cord from my window to the neighbor's window to keep electricity going.
That's right.
Come home and the water's not on. You go to the refrigerator just out of habit. Like, there are people who are struggling. Look, 60 years ago, this country had an opportunity under President Johnson to finally go after the real issue, which is the war on poverty. And the Republican Party took a different route. They said, let's go for this so-called war on drugs. What did it lead to? Mass incarceration, gross disinvestment, the proliferation of privatization in this country. The public good was robbed by extremism in this country. Look, all three of us here have our history as descendants of slaves. I'm a social studies teacher. That's why I'm glad that we're going to send a social studies teacher to the White House with Vice President Kamala Harris. Got to put more teachers in charge. By the way, history teachers are basically lawyers who didn't want to wear suits to work. That's pretty much what we are. But we had a chance to do right a generation ago, and our country was failed. And so the thing that's holding us back is the very people who are trying to roll back the hands of time. As I said this earlier, it's so excruciating watching the Republicans. They're terrible. The only thing that's more excruciating watching the Republicans is being forced to watch breakdancing at the Summer Olympics. And thank God for Karen Bass that the Summer Olympics won't come back with breakdancing in Los Angeles, and neither will Donald Trump.
Well, that is a key question for someone to pose to Karen Bass when they interview her, I have to say. Yes.
Say something about that? Right on all of the above, including the breakdancing. But affordable housing and housing affordability has two components to it. The housing, which we desperately need to build a lot more of, but it's also the affordability, which is about income. while we still have this income inequality and while we still have this income immobility issue that actually has racist background to it, which relates to race and class, and then when we don't have gender equity, we're gonna continue to have a housing inaffordability problem. Because the affordable part of the housing is about income. And if we're still struggling to get people to $15 an hour and $17 an hour, and to make sure that there's parity amongst women and men in the workplace and across, that the C-suite of all these companies don't just look like a RNC convention, we're going to have problems across America with affordability. So what I say on the federal level is making sure that our policies about fairness and not this push, this anti-DEI thing that's happening out here, this is their way of continuing to, try to push away affirmative action, push away things that help bring equity into this country. And they're trying to strip that away, and it's barely getting started. And then the other thing that I would say is, to treat a crisis like a crisis. We are in a housing crisis right now. Right. When we had a pandemic, we suspended a lot of rules to make a lot of things happen, whether it's vaccines, whether it's this or that, because it was a crisis. We're in a housing crisis. On day one, Harris could come out here and tell folks to drop the interest rates on everything that's lending towards, starter homes or affordable housing. Drop the interest rate to as low as possible. You'll see economic engines just start. People start developing housing. You'll start to see people be able to open their doors for more, for more renters to be able to take over their apartments, et cetera, et cetera. I think that we have to treat a crisis like a crisis and get that in like the first 6 months to 12 months. You will see housing production go up and to also move around some zoning laws in the process so you can get things built in a quick amount of time.
And that's so important. Treat a crisis like a crisis.
Yeah.
And that is at the heart of what the problems we're facing in our cities. Our inadequate definition of what a crisis is. When the overwhelming people who are impacted by that crisis is just an issue. When it is a white America that's impacted by that crisis, it's a crisis. When overproliferation of handguns that was taking the lives of young black and brown people in these inner cities, it was just an issue. When you saw assault rifles all of a sudden carrying out the other actions, which was terrible, and I want to be clear on that, it became a crisis. You saw legislation move forward. When you have 40% of our inmates in our correctional facilities that are having learning disabilities, we're not considering that as a crisis. We got to treat it like a crisis. Overproliferation of fentanyl, of crack cocaine. These are crises. And so we have a housing crisis. Just as we did with COVID, when we were faced with a crisis, we kicked in the full strength of our government to address the issue and come up with a vaccine because we knew it was a crisis that was impacting our country. We got to start treating these issues that we're facing in our inner cities as crises and properly define them as crises.
Can I put a punctuation point on that?
Yeah.
Thank you both to Mayor Dickens and Mayor Adams who talked about this being a crisis. During the Great Depression, unemployment for white men was 30%, and our country called it a national crisis. And white men got stuff to dig. They got shovels to dig. They got access to housing. They got access to education. In fact, they had shovels before there were even things to dig. We came up with every single acronym, every single program. And guess what? No one called it entitlement. No one. And so these gentlemen are absolutely right. It is a severe crisis, and that's why having Vice President Kamala Harris and Governor Walz at the head of this country is paramount to strengthening our democracy and making sure that the interests of working people are finally heard.
I mean, one other connected issue is the issue of homelessness, homeless encampments in some cities. I mean, maybe Mayor Adams, on your thoughts on this? I mean, we've seen in California that order to clear by the governor encampments. I mean, what's the situation in your city, in your state, in terms of the homeless numbers and how you handle that?
Well, I'm glad the governor of California followed my suit. I was clear when I got elected that we were not going to be a city where people lived in encampments, and those who were on extreme ends of our party who stated that people should have a right to sleep on the street. That's not dignified. And I was very clear, particularly when you do an analysis, many of them were dealing with severe mental health issues. And if we didn't get them and give them the care, the assistance that they needed, you would create the environment where people were living on the streets. Now, it was aggravated when you have 212,000 migrants and asylum seekers, and you had to pick up the tab of that. But the reality is, we knew that if we were zero focused, not allowing people to live on our streets and not allowing people to be raised in shelters. If a child grows up in a shelter, they're less likely to graduate from high school. And if you don't educate, you will incarcerate. And we were feeding our incarceration numbers because we were not addressing the homelessness. And this homelessness problem is facing our entire country. And we have to, again, build more housing, build more supportive housing. When we closed down many of our psychiatric facilities of inpatient care and took away the inpatient beds, we left people to no other way to get the services that they deserve. That's what we're trying to attempt to turn around our city, but it's a real problem that we're having across America in homelessness.
Yeah, on that issue, Mayor Dickens, am I right in saying that in Atlanta you guys introduced this kind of modular system? I think Mayor Adams mentioned it already for homeless people. Maybe tell us a bit about that. It sounds pretty extreme these days, but
So we in 4 months' time took a parking lot in the city of about 3/4 of an acre, almost an acre, and we transformed it into a village for the unsheltered, and we have them in shipping containers. We took these shipping containers, they have bathrooms in them, showers, toilets, sinks, little mini fridge, microwave, you got Wi-Fi, bed, and gave them all the bedding and you know, all the supplies they needed. We also have a laundry unit for them to use, and you have supportive services for the individuals. It only took 4 months because modular housing, these shipping containers already, they're very quick to produce, and you can put them in trailers or modular, you can stack them. I've seen Karen Bass out in LA. She has one called the Hilda, and it's got about 3 or 4 stories. Mine are all one level, but the next set that we do, we're looking at multi-story on those. They're fast, which is you know, we need rapidly the ability to rehouse these individuals. It's not to be your final destination. It's to get you off the street, and then that way we can help you with your, you know, triage your, whether it's your addictions, whether it's your mental challenges, whether you're in a domestic violence situation we just need to get you out of. So it's, you know, the hope is that you come in here for some undescribed amount of time. We're not saying in 30 days you got to be out or 60 days you got to be out, but we're going to let you get acclimated to being in a, I mean, these folks, when they walk in, they're like, I got a key, tears running down there. You mean I can close this door and nobody, no, this is yours. You know, one lady took 8 showers. You know, she had, you know, just took 8 showers that day and then came out and, you know, we had fish fries and all this stuff. So it's a fun environment versus an unstable environment, sleeping in the woods or under a bridge where everybody's telling you got to go.
But is there not the danger that this becomes a permanent solution, that this is not a stopgap, and then how do you move those people then into a permanent home, which they deserve, as we all know?
Absolutely. I can tell you that that's in the back of our minds, but the human need is in the front of our mind.
Right.
So I'm going to take care of the situation right before us, but I am aware that I don't want anybody to try to live out their whole life for the next 20, 30 years in this trailer, and for us to continue to talk to them about workforce programs. And the biggest thing that we want to do as we're talking about mental health is to get them mentally stable enough that they can return back to their families, their friends, their colleagues that actually care about them, that have homes that they can live in that doesn't cost government funding for housing. Because every unit of housing we have to build costs money. Right. These units are up to $500,000 now per unit to house folks in some of these cities. You know, 300, 400, 500, depending on, you know, what the land cost is. And so building another housing unit for a person that's experiencing homelessness is costly. We will do it if we have to, but the best thing is to help them get the mental support they need, to get a job that they need, so then they can return to society, return to family, and then we can use that unit for the next person that experiences a crisis that they didn't see coming.
Interesting. Just to change tack slightly, we're coming to an end soon, but Mayor Johnson, just see an update here on the protests in this city. Dozens of people were arrested last night. There are more protests going on today. I mean, can you give us an update? How many people are still in jail? What is happening to these people who were detained and arrested last night?
Well, first of all, what I promised was a safe and vibrant convention, and that's just what we have. Protecting the First Amendment is fundamental to our democracy. And protests, we're not mayors of cities without protest. you know, Fannie Lou Hamer was finally seated right here in Chicago, 1968. Montgomery County, Mississippi, about an hour from where my people come from, Salis, Mississippi. and now the son of the soul of Mississippi gets to welcome the entire world. And so, where we are is where we've always been as a nation. We're going to protect the fundamental right to have grievance. Unlike the Republican Party, when they get upset, they call for the destruction of our democracy. These people are out of their minds. They literally are.
But what about the protesters that were?
Listen, protest is happening in the city of Chicago.
Yeah.
You know that as mayors, we are the most protested politician anywhere in the world.
Yeah, but you did
So
a lot of them have been arrested.
So my wife's birthday was last night. You know who protested me last night?
But I also want to know about the people who were actually arrested, though.
Is that you're going to get a chance to hear the first black first lady in the history of the world, as my wife is the first black first lady in the city of Chicago. Okay. So my marriage is saved. And the city of Chicago is still strong. And let me just say quickly, I am so proud of these two brothers. Every time I call, they pick up. Sometimes they'll just text and just check in on me. Sometimes they get advice of what they should wear when they go to public events.
So should we expect more arrests today? Is that going to be happening?
What you should expect is a safe, vibrant, exciting convention in the city where the Model T, electricity, Carnegie Steel came to life, and where we're going to launch the first black woman of Asian descent to the most powerful post in America.
Well, we keep an eye on those protests. I mean, Mayor,
that's a great, and I think that sometimes we underestimate the beauty of our smooth transition of power and the right to protest. And you're right. We've had over 3,000 protests in our city. And if you want to do it peacefully, you are allowed to do so. I protested. I walked the street. I protected protesters. I know what it is to reach the point that you want to raise your voice. And that's a healthy democracy when people can do it. We should do it with peaceful protests. And that I encourage people to raise their voice like I've done for so many years when I was with 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement and an advocate for change. But there's nothing wrong with protests. In fact, everything is right with protests. And convention equals protest.
Yeah, but you were criticized by some for the way you sent in, officials when there was the pro-Palestinian protests in those universities. In Columbia, I was there myself in April, in New York. I mean, did you take too much of a hard hand on those protesters?
No, I'm very clear. The prerequisite to prosperity is public safety. And when you make the determination that your beliefs could allow you to go in and take over a school building and do things that's disruptive, and we didn't go in, we were asked to come in, because we can't go on private property without the permission of the institution to do so. So we were very clear. When you're ready for us to come in, we're going to come in and give you support you deserve. You are not going to be in the city of New York and make the determination that you're going to break into a building, threaten those who are inside, and do whatever you want. That is not going to happen in the city of New York. You can protest peacefully, but you're going to follow the law.
Do you think the Democratic Party generally is a problem in that people think it is too soft on crime?
They can't think that, because I'm the mayor of the city of New York, and I have the safest big city in America, and I'm a Democrat.
But, I mean, do you not feel that this is a battle you're losing in the public perception, that Republicans are seen as a party?
That's a great question.
There's a messaging problem.
Great question. Right. Clarity of message. And the biggest mistake we've made, I believe, as a party around this issue is that we have been ashamed to show our record on it. We are doing proactive ways to prevent crime, and we're going after things like assault rifles, things like the overproliferation of handguns in our community. And I think that's what VP Harris is going to be able to do. She's going to be able to show the balance of public safety and justice. Because Ms. Jones in public housing, you go to her and tell her, take your police off your block, she'll look at you like you're crazy. Right. She wants that, but she don't want that same police officer to harass her grandson when he's walking down the block. So I think VP Harris is going to be able to show the message that the Democratic Party has been afraid of showing, that we support our police and we support proper policing. That's a powerful message for inner city communities and many of my immigrant communities that are extremely strong public safety as well.
Final question to you, Eric Adams.
I felt like this was Jeopardy.
No, yes, but it's a good one. Were you surprised that you didn't you weren't offered a speaking slot at this convention.
No, think about it for a moment. I don't even understand, like, what's the issues around this. You only have a certain number of speaking slots. This is not the Eric Adams show. New York, we're good. We're good. We need to be going after those swing states. And if the party would have said, let's look at all of these locales where we're solid in, not swing state, and let's have them on the stage giving speeches, I'm going to say, what are you guys doing? We need to be zeroing in on where we need to win. This is not about, hey, can Eric come up and give a great speech? This is about, can we win the race? And this unselfish approach of a mayor that's opening his city, of mayors that are saying, let's come together and win this is not about us. We're going to have our own election. It's, I don't have to be on stage. I'm the mayor of New York. My life is the stage.
Okay, well, on that note, yes?
I want to push on this, just one last note here. The connection between New York and, Atlanta and Chicago, it's not just about whether or not there's a messaging problem. We actually have the message that the people of America want to hear. Because remember, it was extremism in this country that produced a documentary called A Birth of a Nation to scare people. This is not about just simply messaging. This is about speaking to the hopes and aspirations of this country and of this democracy. And Mayor Adams, Mayor Dickens, and myself, we're all committed to realizing a real perfect union. And the best way that we do that is tell the truth to people, speak truth to truth, and make sure that we can protect the power to do what we know is right for the American people. So I want to thank Mayor Adams and Mayor Dickens for being in my
Final
city.
word, Mayor Dickens?
Yeah, I hit the barbershops and the beauty salons. That's where I need to give my speeches, to remind them to go out there and vote, to remind them about what's coming next with that Harris administration. Get your, start looking at houses so you can get this $25,000 down payment assistance. That's the message, and those are the speeches that we're giving inside of the city to make sure that these folks turn out for this election, one, so we can make sure that our democracy is saved. Two, or you're asking about protests, we need to make sure that when this Donald Trump doesn't win again, that we don't have the problem that we had January 6th the last time. So that's where the violence took place, where they tried to take over the Capitol and ended up killing folks and hurting folks. So ultimately, what we're doing is the heavy lifting of the United States occurs right at the job of the mayor. You get to see us, you get to talk to us, you get to fuss at us. Our lives are protests. You put a stop sign where somebody wanted a traffic light, they're protesting. All right? So glad to be on this stage with these two hard-working gentlemen.
And Mayor Johnson's going to have a message that I think all of our mayors can feel. There's a uniqueness to being a mayor, and having someone that can articulate that message means a lot to us all, and we don't want to have to articulate that.
Okay, well, look, thank you very much for our three mayors, Mayor Brandon Johnson, Andre Dickens, and Mayor Eric Adams.